If you want to see the experience of a second-year MD-PhD student, then this is the video for you. In this video, I'll give you an overview of my year from the coursework, clinical experiences, life outside of medical school, and of course, preparing for the final boss, Step 1. Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Bilal. I'm an MD-PhD student at the University of Maryland, and I am working on this video series where I try to document what each year of the MD-PhD program is like, starting from year 1 up until hopefully year 9, as I do plan to finish my PhD in a few months. And the idea is take you through the program year by year, tell you what it looked like for me from my perspective, as well as highlight some of the things that are specific or unique to those who are in MD-PhD programs. I did previously post a video showcasing year 1. So this is the next video in the series. I'm going to talk about year 2, taking you from the beginning up until the very end. So with that, let's begin. Year 2 of medical school is perhaps one of the most difficult periods of my life. And a big reason for that was Step 1. And you'll kind of see that permeate as a theme throughout this video, because ultimately the end point of year 2 is to take Step 1, my board exam, and after that transition to graduate school. For my peers who were MD only, they would go on to the clinical phase of their medical school training. Now, back when I took Step 1, it was sort of the end-all be-all of medical school exams. Back then it was scored, and it was really important to get a high score if you were interested in a competitive specialty. At that time, it was a huge factor in admissions criteria, and your Step 1 score could essentially determine whether you were eligible to do a certain specialty or whether you would have to think about something else entirely. So as you can imagine, it was an extremely stressful exam, was extremely stressful to study for. And so you'll definitely see that as a theme throughout this video. Okay, so let's talk about the coursework in year 2. I took a total of 4 different courses in year 2, or 4 major blocks. And within those, there were basically sub-blocks that covered more specific topics. So the 4 blocks were Foundations of Disease, which is a pass-fail course that lasted for the first 2 weeks of my second year. And from what I remember, this covered things like biostatistics. Right after that, we had our infectious disease and immunology course. Then it was Pathophysiology and Therapeutics 1 and Pathophysiology and Therapeutics 2. So those Pathophysiology and Therapeutics courses were basically subdivided into modules that covered things like cardiology, female reproductive system, GI, and all these different organ systems. So as I said earlier, Step 1 sort of underlies everything that you do in year 2 of medical school. It's like the big boss at the end of the tunnel, at the end of the game, that you got to take out. So really everything you do, your mindset, everything kind of revolves around this exam. And for me, it was no different. So as I said earlier, I got into studying with Sketchy and I started using a lot more Anki. I actually downloaded the Zonki deck and I followed that, the Zonki flashcards throughout second year. And I was doing it everywhere. I mean, even when I was going on trips, when I was going to see my family, I was always doing these flashcards and trying to make sure that I did not fall behind on my Zonki deck. But I did still fall behind. I mean, it's just, at some point, it's inevitable. I mean, you're trying to balance 2 curriculums at once. So you almost had 2 different curriculums that you have to stay on top of: what you're learning in medical school and the curriculum that you need to know that covers everything you need to know for STEP. So it was super stressful. And the way I managed it was I based all my studying off of STEP. So for example, if I had a lecture that day that was covering something in, I don't know, if I covered a specific topic, I try to find a video in Pathoma for that same topic, and I watched that first to learn it, and then I used my medical school lecture to supplement that. And I took notes on what was, so I kind of like try to master everything in Pathoma or these other resources that I use for Step 1. And then the week before the exam is where I tried drilling in everything that I need to know for my medical school exam specifically. During second year, we were also trained to become proficient in history taking and performing the physical exam. Throughout the year, we had standardized patients that we could practice on, and at the end of the year, we had a clinical skills test. So I don't have any footage of that, but I do have footage of me practicing on my cat. Okay, so now I'm going to examine the rest of your lymph nodes. We're going to go tonsillar, submandibular, submental. Okay, good. Let me see your eyes. Your eyes look good. All right, I'm gonna close your eyes. Try to open your eyes. Okay. What's next? All right, let's do the convergence test. So with that, I was basically giving you an idea of what my second year looked like in terms of the medical school coursework. But as an MD-PhD student, there's also a little bit of an added stress, which is I needed to select my research mentor for the upcoming year. And as I spoke about in a different video, I had a PI who I really wanted to work with. She was my number one choice. She was, I think you could say in a way that she is the reason that I ended up choosing Maryland. Well, I was talking to her about a position in her lab. I was actually applying for funding, and one day I got an email from her telling me that she was leaving. She was leaving Maryland and going to another institution. So I could no longer work with her. So then I had to kind of scramble and figure out another PI to work with. And that was another theme that permeated throughout the year. I was very fortunate that my current PI was moving to the Maryland system at that point in time. You know, had it been a year later, I may have not found her, obviously. Like, I wouldn't have been working with her. I would have probably worked with someone else. And I'm so glad that she came at that exact time, because it's really been a fantastic fit, and I've enjoyed working in this lab, in the environment that I'm in right now. But it kind of goes to show you never really know what you're in for. Like, when I was at my first year and a half, I thought I was going to work with the first PI that I mentioned. Didn't work out, and now that I look back at it, I'm kind of happy about the way things turned out. But yeah, so year two, you're also finalizing these other details. As a bioengineering student, for example, I had to formally apply to the bioengineering program at the University of Maryland College Park, get accepted there. And I think that was more of a formality, but it's just, you got to take care of some of this other paperwork, other logistics that you need to do for your PhD. Despite the stress, I did manage to have some fun, and I think I really tried to emphasize having fun and keeping a cool head despite the amount of stress that I was under from medical school. And for me, traveling was a good outlet, a way to do this. So during this time, I would take quick trips to places like Colorado, Miami, or Chicago, and really just try to harness any available free time that I had, enjoy some time out, spend some time with family that I hadn't met, and really try to keep myself level-headed throughout the process of studying for STEP1. But like I mentioned earlier, I was still studying while traveling. So like when I was in the plane, or when I was commuting or in a bus or something from one place to another, I still try to keep on top of my Anki cards. That way I wouldn't fall behind while on the go. And ultimately, everything came to a head in May of 2019. This is when year two was wrapping up, and it was time to move on and really hunker down for step one studying. Prior to the end of medical school, we took our practice NBME exam, and despite all my prep work, I didn't do too well. I think now that I look back at it, I think one thing I did too much of is I did too much learning and not enough practicing. And what I mean by that is I was focusing on learning the concepts, but I didn't do enough practice questions on UWorld and other test banks, really understand how to attack this exam. And that's what I think this exam has. Like, there's two essential components, right? Like, you have to know obviously the concepts, but you also have to know how to take the exam. So you're given a certain you only have a certain amount of time to answer a certain number of questions. How much time do you dedicate to each question? Like, how fast can you read the questions and figure out what the best possible answer is? So those are all skills that you have to develop. And therefore, it's really not enough to just learn the concepts. You really, really have to practice the questions. So I think that was sort of a wake-up call for me. I felt like I was on top of things throughout the year, and all of a sudden a switch flipped and I felt like I was so behind. Another complicating factor was that we were actually moving at this time because my wife was starting PA school in a few weeks in DC. So we had to move from Baltimore to DC, and moving and like trying to set up a new place while you're in the most stressful academic period of your life is not fun. You know, just to give you a bit of honesty here, I sort of lost the vibe that had got me to this point. You know, a good example that comes to mind is like these NFL playoff teams who are doing so well throughout the regular season, and all of a sudden the playoff comes and they try something different, and it's sort of they don't do too well. That's how I felt during my dedicated period, because I went from being sort of like regimented as far as like how much I was studying and trying to incorporate break time into all of a sudden being in panic mode because of that result that I got, and because of the fact that my time all of a sudden felt very limited. Yet no matter how much I studied, it just felt like I could do more. And it almost felt like my hours were minutes and my weeks were days, right? So it's kind of like things were just flying by, and before I knew it, it was time to take the exam. Another mistake that I made during this time was, as I felt like I was falling more behind, I tried doing more and more. So for example, I felt like I had to cover all of I had to like finish an entire chapter of like first aid or boards and beyond, whatever resource I was using at the time before I took the relevant UWorld for that topic. Or for example, I tried doing all of the UWorld questions and I was kind of going through it really fast. I focused more on quantity than quality, and like I said, everything just started feeling really rushed and very, very stressful. It was not a good time in my life, and I think for anyone who's watching this, the one thing I will recommend based off my own experience is don't lose track of who you are, what got you to where you are right now. I don't think anything is worth compromising your fitness or your sleep, because especially if you start compromising those things, you become less efficient. It may have taken you in like an hour to do something, but now it's taking you like 3 or 4 hours because you're just so tired, burned out, and sleep deprived. So in the end, it doesn't really help. And it's really easy to say that right now. I feel like if someone told me that back then, I would have had a really hard time listening to this advice. But I think after going through it, I really, really understand how important it is to follow this advice. Like, you just cannot lose yourself to this abyss. You have to take care of yourself. That is the number one most important thing while you're going through this, especially now because step 1 is pass fail. So hopefully it's a lot less stressful for everyone who's taking it now. But even for these other exams that are coming up, like step 2, I still got to take that, and I think I'm gonna hopefully I will be able to heed to this mentality when I take step 2. Nothing is worth risking or damaging your health, especially your mental health. In the end, I mean, no matter what happens, hopefully you'll be fine, right? You put in the work, you just do your best. Anything you do to compromise your health will only backfire on you. I ended up becoming so stressed that I pushed my exam back by 2 weeks. And honestly, it didn't help me one bit. Like, I should have just taken it 2 weeks earlier, and I would have been much happier if I did so. It would not have made any difference. My scores weren't going up. I'd really plateaued at that point, right? And it was a waste. It was a waste of time. I should not have done that. But once I was over, so was year 2. And I think that was probably the most relieved I've been to finish a year of school. Like, it was so stressful, especially step 1. Fortunately, I had a break built in. My friend was getting married, and we sort of had like a bachelor party trip, I guess. So we all went to Iceland right after, and I took that break before I started graduate school. But yeah, I think that's like a basic summary of year 2. The main focus throughout the year was my step 1 exam. I was also trying to figure out my mentor and graduate school. I was also trying to figure out whose lab I was going to work in and my research rotations for the following summer. But by and far, step 1 is the most stressful thing that I've ever been through. I know step 2 is also coming up, and I hope I can adhere to the lessons that I learned from step 1 when I study for and take step 2. But yeah, that's all I have for this video. That's all I could think of. If you have any other questions, feel free to leave a comment below, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. Thanks for watching, and I hope you'll tune in next time.